Senator from Nevada.
I ask that the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Mr. President, yesterday, along with Senators Hutchison and McConnell, we introduced a resolution of disapproval that, if adopted, will overturn the FCC's attempt to regulate the Internet through its recent open Internet order. In December, the FCC, defying Congress and the judiciary, announced an order that will give it sweeping new authority to regulate content on and access to the Internet. Particularly in today's economy, the Internet and associated applications should be able to evolve without unnecessary government interference that could stifle innovation and stifle job creation. The last thing the government needs to do is to once again burden the private sector with additional burdensome regulatory red tape. While the FCC's action is certainly concerning, it should come as no surprise, considering this administration's history of usurping the private sector role in our economy and replacing it with a more heavy-handed federal regulation. As we've learned, such regulation only serves to micromanage private businesses, and it limits their ability of companies to grow. On the contrary, this order will serve to smother creative new uses for the Internet, and it will slow the expansion of advanced broadband networks. As we know, the Internet has become an indispensable part of our economy and an integral part of our society. It's a source of innovation, information, entertainment, commerce, and communication. Largely unfettered by government laws and regulations, the Internet owes much of its success to innovators and to entrepreneurs who have had the freedom to imagine, to explore, and to create new uses for the Internet. Mr. President, the innovation and ingenuity associated with the creation and development of the Internet in this country is a prime example of what the private sector is capable of doing if its hands are not completely tied by Washington. The problem with the FCC's order is that it put the FCC itself in a position of being the final arbiter of what broadband service providers can and cannot do with their networks. As the Internet evolves, new network services and management practices may be necessary or desirable. Yet I fear the companies will now either be barred from innovating or will have to seek the FCC's permission first. Under the order, Internet providers, quote, shall not block lawful content, applications, services, or non-harmful devices subject to reasonable network management. The order also states that these providers shall not unreasonably discriminate in transmitting lawful network traffic over a consumer's broadband Internet access service. Well, guess who gets to make the determination of what constitutes lawful or reasonable? It's not the consumer. It's not Congress. Rather, these are unelected bureaucrats at the FCC who alone will make those determinations. This gives the federal government, for the first time, the power to make decisions that will affect what websites consumers can and cannot access and how they may access them. I continue to believe that the competitive market is the best means to pressure or to preserve and advance the future of the Internet. That is why I've continued to fight the FCC's attempt at regulating the Internet under the guise of preserving openness. In 2009, I co-sponsored an amendment with Senator Hutchison that would have prohibited the FCC from using any appropriated funds to adopt, implement, or otherwise litigate any network neutrality-based rules, protocols, or standards. Also, late last year, I authored a letter signed by 28 of my colleagues to the FCC urging it not to proceed with this order. With the sweeping new authority that the FCC has given itself, one question should be asked. Is this order even necessary? How many people in this country have been unable to access the Internet like the order would suggest? Do the American people really want more government oversight when it comes to the Internet? The Internet is that last frontier when it comes to innovation without government interference. Do we really want to jeopardize that? Isn't this more like a solution looking for a problem? Consumers today have more Internet access, more Internet services than ever before. Business has invested tens of billions of dollars in new broadband infrastructure in this country. Internet entrepreneurs continue to offer new services, applications, devices, and content to users of broadband Internet networks. In this type of environment, there is little justification for this type of proposed intrusion into the broadband marketplace. It appears then that this order is simply a solution in search of a problem that does not exist. And as we've seen time and time again in Washington, this is a recipe for producing unintended consequences, things that are not foreseen, the problems that this new rule will actually create. With the sweeping new authority the FCC has given itself, one question should be asked again. Is this order even necessary? Well, we need to answer that question, I believe, by saying no, that in this type of environment there is little justification for this type of rule into the marketplace that is going to handcuff the Internet in the future. Rather, Congress should work with the industry to find ways to encourage broadband investment and to promote competition amongst Internet providers. You see, investors are eager out there. Even during this economic downturn, tens of billions of dollars have been invested in new broadband infrastructure. In turn, this has enabled Internet entrepreneurs to offer new services and new applications, new devices, and content to more and more users of broadband. President Obama recently announced his initiative to expand broadband deployment so that 98% of Americans have access to wireless Internet service. I support this goal. However, for this goal to be achievable, there needs to be a substantial private sector investment and participation, which I believe cannot coexist with the FCC's order. In fact, I'm confident that if this Congress and the courts do not act to reverse this order will discourage investment, stifle innovation, and cost this country more jobs. The FCC's order is anti-free market, anti-competitive, and it will threaten American innovation. And as I said before, it will cost American jobs. So what possible reason would the private sector agree to invest under this type of heavy-handed regulatory environment provided under this order? I think it will dramatically limit investment. This order only creates disincentives for private investment and innovation, which will only put us behind the rest of the world when it comes to broadband. The good news is that Congress has the tools to correct this order. So I encourage my colleagues to support the Hutchison-McConnell-Ensign resolution of disapproval of the FCC's new rule. This will allow Congress to repeal the FCC's dangerous order on net neutrality. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Illinois.
Mr. President, I seek recognition to speak as if in morning business.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. We are spending money that we do not have. The administration budget proposes taxing the American people to the tune of $2.6 trillion, spending $3.7 trillion, and borrowing $1.1 trillion. Under the budget, interest payments on the debt are set to quadruple from $200 billion this year to $900 billion in 10 years. The great Harvard economic historian Niall Ferguson has stated that the decline of a country can be measured when it pays its moneylenders more than its army. We will hit that level in the next few fiscal years. Now, in response today, I am announcing our first Silver Fleece Award. It's not a Golden Fleece Award because in this time of austerity, we can no longer afford that. We pay homage to Senator William Proxmire of Wisconsin that put forward the Golden Fleece Awards in the late 1970s and 1980s. Working with Senator Tom Coburn of Oklahoma, we feature what is in his Wastebook on a new site called Wastebook on Facebook. There, the Silver Fleece Award is being proposed in 3 parts for a vote by people who wish to participate. This month, we had 3 nominees for the Silver Fleece Award. The second runner-up was a pair of National Science Foundation grants worth $456,000. These grants went to studies on why political candidates make vague statements and how Americans use online dating. The first runner-up was for $615,000 in a grant to create a library archive about the Grateful Dead, a well-known rock and roll band. However, neither of these 2 projects was voted on as the worst of the current waste we see. Instead, the inaugural winner of the Silver Fleece Award is for a nearly $1 million grant going to fund signs to display poetry in zoos. The organization administering the program, Poets House and Public Library, states that the goal of the program is to, quote, deepen public awareness of environmental issues through poetry. I would add, using borrowed taxpayer funds. Thanks to this nearly $1 million program, a visitor to the Little Rock Zoo in Arkansas can now read the words of author Hans Christian Andersen saying, quote, just as living is not enough, said the butterfly, one must have sunshine, freedom, and a little flower. I would argue that future generations would be far more interested in a life without debt, and taxpayers should not pick up the bill for such projects. I ask unanimous consent to submit to the record the 2008 Reader's Digest article, The Poets House and Public Library Statement on the Language of Conservation, and the April 15, 2010 article from the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette on this.
Without objection.
Thank you. I would also now like to announce the new nominees for the next March Silver Fleece Award. First, we will have the opportunity to vote to give the Silver Fleece Award for a $150,000 transportation grant to create a, quote, wildlife crossing at Moncton, Vermont. This is a technical term for a tunnel that will allow salamanders and other animals to cross below a road. Our second nominee is a $460,000 grant from the National Science Foundation to study why people lie in text messages. And third, we will nominate funding for a video game called Wolf Quest, which was funded by a $508,253 grant from the National Science Foundation to a Minnesota zoo. We invite your votes and your feedback on Wastebook on Facebook to decide what next month's Silver Fleece Award winner will be. Sadly, thing is the only loser currently is the American people. And I yield back. Thank you, Mr. President. Oh, Mr. President, I would gently suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka?
An update while we wait for senators to come to the floor to speak. A procedural vote expected in the 2 o'clock hour here in the Senate. Earlier today, Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke, Securities and Exchange Commission Chairman Mary Shapiro, and Commodities Future Trading Commission Chairman Gary Gensler detailed the process of implementing hundreds of new rules for the nation's financial system 6 months after the Dodd-Frank financial reform law was enacted. Regulatory policymakers provided a progress report today on the bill's passage and implementation before the Senate Banking Committee. That was this morning. Coming up this afternoon, Homeland Security Secretary Janet Napolitano expected to testify before the Senate Homeland Security Committee, and you can watch that on C-SPAN 3. Meanwhile, the House continues for a third day its consideration of the continuing resolution, H.R. number 1, to fund the federal government through September. Final vote on the bill expected sometime over the next few days. The measure will then be sent to the Senate for consideration possibly the last week in February. The current continuing resolution expires on March 4th. House lawmakers have been debating and considering amendments to the 359-page measure. Nearly 600 amendments were filed on the spending bill, though not all will be offered or considered. This morning, the House approved the Senate's changes to H.R. 514. That was the bill to extend expiring provisions of the Patriot Act through May 27. That vote was 279 to 143. Live coverage of the House on C-SPAN. Again, Homeland Security Secretary Janet Napolitano on C-SPAN 3 a little later this afternoon. And you're watching live coverage of the Senate here on C-SPAN 2.
Mr. President,
The senator from West Virginia.
I ask unanimous consent that the order of the quorum call be rescinded.
Without objection.
Mr. President, in about 5 minutes, we're going to be hopefully voting for cloture on the underlying bill, the basic FAA bill, which has been the product of an awful lot of work. And I think, generally speaking, we have tried to bring everybody in. Senators do have rights. And as a bill comes closer to a cloture vote or a passage vote, some of those rights are exercised, which then complicates things. But on the other hand, it's what the system is, and people ought to have those rights. I mean, you can't ask everybody to sort of sit back and think through a whole bill. Something occurs to them at the last moment, they need to come down and address that. And we've tried to do that. I think that we're pretty close to a slots amendment agreement. And not everybody is happy about it, but everybody's given up and everybody's gotten from it. And so we'll have this vote, and then we will continue work on various aspects of the bill. I hope we can get it done tonight from the Senate side. Then we have to go negotiate with the House, and their bill is quite different. But what's interesting about the aviation bill, it really does affect America vastly. You know, I don't know how many times I've said it employs 11 million people. Actually, it employs direct and indirect probably closer to 13 million people. And it affects people's lives in every single way. They're trying to build a high-speed rail system. You can't build a high-speed interstate system. You can take a chance at it, but it doesn't work very well. So travel by aviation is really how people get to where they want to go. It's a complicated industry. Costs go up. Sometimes it's because of fuel. Passengers are held on tarmacs, sometimes because there's just congestion or there's a crisis at the airport of some sort. And passengers, when they're on their way from one place to another, don't sort of think about the problems that the airline industry or the airports are going through. They just think about the fact they're being inconvenienced if, in fact, they are being that way. But I think it's a very, very good bill, and it's been worked on a very, very long time by myself and an extraordinarily wonderful Senator Kay Bailey Hutchinson, who's, I call her co-chair of the Commerce Committee because she is. And people have operated in good faith. And we've had a lot of scrums and huddles on the Senate floor. But that's the way legislation probably needs to work. It's a very complicated bill, but it's a bill that I think that we will get cloture on, and people should actually be very anxious to vote for when it comes to final passage. And I will give a talk about that, but I just remind people again that we have an air traffic control system which is so antiquated that there are actually very many near misses in the sky because we're using a radar system. And planes often come very close to running into each other on the tarmac. It's a very old system. It's a 50-year-old system. And this bill will fix that and make it safer for people to travel. More planes can take off and fly. So I hope that we invoke cloture at 2, and then we'll continue to work on the bill. It's important for America, and it's important to satisfy as many people as we possibly can. I thank the presiding officer, yield the floor, and note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
I'm supposed to be replaced at 2, but I'm glad to have this. Thank you. Now, what happened?
Mr. President,
The senator from West Virginia.
I ask unanimous consent that the quorum call be rescinded.
Without
And I
objection.
presume we will be moving to a vote.
The clerk will report the motion to invoke cloture.
Cloture motion. We, the undersigned senators, in accordance with the provisions of Rule 22 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, hereby move to bring to a close the debate on calendar number 5, S-223, FAA Air Transportation Modernization and Safety Improvement Act, signed by 17 senators.
By unanimous consent, the mandatory quorum call has been waived. The question is it the sense of the Senate that debate on S-223, the FAA Air Transportation Modernization and Safety Improvement Act, shall be brought to a close? The yeas and nays are mandatory under the rule. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka, Mr. Alexander, Ms. Ayotte, Mr. Barrasso, Mr. Baucus, Mr. Begich, Mr. Bennett, Mr. Bingaman, Mr. Blumenthal. Mr. Blunt, Mr. Bozeman, Mrs. Boxer, Mr. Brown of Massachusetts, Mr. Brown of Ohio, Mr. Burr, Ms. Cantwell, Mr. Cardin, Mr. Carper, Mr. Casey, Mr. Chambliss, Mr. Coates, Mr. Coburn, Mr. Cochran, Ms. Collins, Mr. Conrad, Mr. Coons, Mr. Corker, Mr. Cornyn, Mr. Crapo, Mr. Dement, Mr. Durbin, Mr. Ensign, Mr. Enzi, Mrs. Feinstein, Mr. Franken, Mrs. Gillibrand, Mr. Graham. Ma'am. Sir. Mrs. Hagan. Mr. Harkin. Mr. Hatch. I got you. Mr. Hoven. Mrs. Hutchison. Mr. Inhofe. Mr. Inouye. Mr. Isaacson. Mr. Johans. Mr. Johnson of Wisconsin. Mr. Johnson of South Dakota. Mr. Kerry. Mr. Kirk. Ms. Klobuchar. Mr. Cole. Mr. Kyle. Ms. Landrieu. Mr. Lautenberg. Mr. Leahy. Mr. Lee. Mr. Levin. Mr. Lieberman. Mr. Lugar. Mr. Manchin. Mr. McCain. Mrs. McCaskill. Mr. McConnell. Mr. Menendez. Mr. Merkley. Ms. Mikulski. Mr. Moran. Ms. Murkowski. Mrs. Murray. Mr. Nelson of Nebraska. Mr. Nelson of Florida. Mr. Paul. Mr. Portman. Mr. Pryor. Mr. Reed of Rhode Island. Mr. Reed of Nevada. Mr. Risch. I got you. Mr. Roberts. Mr. Rockefeller. Mr. Rubio. Good. Sir. I got you. Thank you.
How's that?
Perfect. Perfect. Mr. Sanders. Mr. Schumer. Mr. Sessions. Mrs. Shaheen, Mr. Shelby. Ms. Snow. Ms. Stabenow. Mr. Tester. Mr. Thune. Mr. Toomey. Mr. Udall of Colorado. Mr. Udall of New Mexico. Mr. Vitter. Mr. Warner. Mr. Webb. Mr. Whitehouse. Mr. Wicker. Mr. Wyden. Senators voting in the affirmative: Akaka, Alexander, Barrasso, Begich, Bennett, Bingaman, Blumenthal, Blunt, Brown of Massachusetts, Brown of Ohio, Cardin, Chambliss, Coates, Coburn, Cochran, Collins, Corker, Cornyn, Ensign, Enzi, Feinstein, Franken, Gillibrand, Graham, Grassley, Hagan, Harkin, Hatch, Hoven, Inhofe, Inouye, Isaacson, Kyle, Landrieu, Lieberman, Lugar, McConnell, Menendez, Mikulski, Moran, Murray, Portman, Pryor, Rita Rhode Island, Roberts, Rockefeller, Sanders, Shaheen, Udall of Colorado, Udall of New Mexico, Warner, Webb, Whitehouse, and Wicker. No senator voted in the negative. Mr. Lautenberg. Mr. Lautenberg, aye. Mr. Sessions. Mr. Sessions, aye. Mr. Levin. Mr. Levin, aye. Mr. McCain. Mr. McCain, aye. Mr. Thune. Mr. Thune, aye. Mr. Bozeman. Mr. Bozeman, aye. Mr. Rubio. Mr. Rubio, aye. Mr. Crapo. Mr. Crapo, aye. Ms. Murkowski. Ms. Murkowski, aye. Mr. Leahy. Mr. Leahy, aye. Mr. Burr. Mr. Burr, aye. Mrs. Hutchison, aye. Mr. Shelby. Mr. Coons. Mr. Coons, aye. Ms. Klobuchar. Ms. Klobuchar, aye. Mr. Lee. Mr. Lee, aye. Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson of Wisconsin, aye. Mr. Paul, no. Mr. Toomey. Mr. Toomey, aye. Ms. Ayotte, aye. Mr. Durbin. Mr. Durbin, Aye. Mr. Carper. Mr. Carper. Aye. Mr. Dement. No. Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson of South Dakota. Aye. Mr. Tester. Mr. Tester. Aye. Mrs. Boxer. Mrs. Boxer. Aye. Mr. Bacchus. Mr. Bacchus. Aye. Mr. Wyden. Mr. Wyden, aye. Ms. Cantwell, aye. Mr. Manchin. Mr. Manchin, aye. Mr. Casey. Mr. Casey, aye. Mr. Johans. Mr. Johans, aye. Mr. Risch. Mr. Risch, aye. Mr. Nelson. Mr. Nelson of Nebraska, aye. Mrs. McCaskill. Mrs. McCaskill, aye. Ms. Snow. Ms. Snow, aye. Mr. Cole, aye. Mr. Schumer. Mr. Schumer, aye. Mr. Conrad. Mr. Conrad. Aye. Mr. Kirk. Mr. Kirk. Aye. Mr. Nelson of Florida. Aye. Mr. Reed of Nevada. Aye.